From the cold expanse of the cosmos, there exists a realm on Earth that masquerades as an idyllic, vibrant emerald paradise, a primordial domain harboring depths so densely choked in darkness and vegetation, they remain utterly untouched by human presence. Just imagine, what untold secrets might be lurking within the 6.7 million square kilometers of this uncharted, suffocating abyss? Could colossal apex predators, anacondas spanning well over 30 feet, still be lying in wait beneath the murky depths of these forgotten swamps? Or perhaps, entombed beneath this labyrinth of roots, lies the remnants of an ancient, forgotten civilization, whose very name has been erased from the annals of history. Welcome to the greatest enigma on Earth, the Amazon. But do not let its breathtaking majesty deceive you. The year was 1541. Spanish conquistador Francisco de Orellana, leading a ruthless expeditionary force, plunged into this uncharted wilderness in pursuit of El Dorado, the legendary city of gold. But the brutal reality soon dawned on them. They hadn't stumbled upon a verdant paradise, but a living, breathing hell. The allure of shimmering gold quickly vanished. Within mere days, sheer starvation drove these battle-hardened men to the absolute brink of insanity, forcing them to boil and devour their own leather belts and the soles of their boots just to survive. But their agonizing descent was merely the prelude. As the broken men begged for mercy, they were abruptly ambushed by a fierce, unrelenting force of indigenous female warriors. The sheer terror inflicted by those female warriors that day permanently branded this unforgiving wilderness with a legendary moniker, the Amazon. And to the early explorers who barely survived, it earned a far more sinister title, the Green Hell. That historical nightmare was only the beginning. Even today, this biosphere defies the very laws of science. Now picture this. You are navigating the deepest reaches of the Peruvian jungle, when suddenly you lose your footing, plunging uncontrollably into a raging river below. But this water isn't cold, it is violently boiling, and there isn't a single active volcano for hundreds of miles. Yet the enigmatic waters of Shanai Timpishka see that such cataclysmic temperatures that any creature unfortunate enough to fall in is boiled alive in a matter of seconds. And those who somehow survived the immediate horrors of this biome were ultimately swallowed by the Amazon, vanishing without a trace. Take the legendary British explorer, Colonel Percy Fawcett in 1925. Driven by the myth of a lost, enigmatic city, he vanished into the suffocating depths of this very jungle, never to be seen again. Sprawling across 9 South American nations, this botanical empire is so phenomenally vast that, were it a sovereign state, it would rank as the 7th largest country on Earth. Encompassing an area nearly the size of the contiguous United States, this labyrinth of 390 billion trees appears from a distance as a serene and breathtaking paradise. But beneath that tranquil canopy lies a ruthless and unforgiving underworld, because lurking in the suffocating shadows of these ancient giants, evolution has engineered biological killing machines that defy our darkest nightmares. Chapter 1. Aquatic Assassins. Beneath the dense canopy of 390 billion trees lies more than just a treacherous forest floor. It conceals the most colossal, deepest, and enigmatic hydrological network on the planet, the Amazon River. To truly comprehend its staggering hydrological power, consider this. The Amazon is so titanically massive that if you combine the flow of the next 7 largest rivers on Earth, the Amazon would still independently discharge more water into the ocean than all of them put together. And its depth. Plunging into the abyss, it fractures the Earth, dropping well over 330 feet into pure aquatic darkness. Beneath its surface lies a submerged abyss, an aquatic underworld where sunlight is permanently exiled. Attempting to traverse this titan from one end to the other has always been a harrowing flirtation with death. When explorer Ed Stafford undertook the agonizing endeavor of walking its entire length, Through it demanded an excruciating 860 days, nearly 2.5 years of relentless physical torment. And when Martin Strel embraced the sheer lunacy of swimming its treacherous length, he wagered his life daily against apex predators like caimans and relentless swarms of piranhas. Exactly what biological horrors are concealed within these vast, murky depths remains one of science's most profound enigmas. This absolute zero-visibility environment provided the perfect evolutionary crucible, forcing its inhabitants to adapt not just to survive, but to mutate from ordinary fauna into nature's ultimate biological killing machines. Make no mistake, the Amazon is not a life-giving sanctuary. It is a churning, aquatic deathbed. Consider one of its most lethal denizens, a creature that isn't a fish at all, but a sentient, high-voltage live wire navigating the abyss. Meet the newly discovered species of electric eel, the Electrophorus voltae. It doesn't rely on fangs to subdue its prey, but weaponizes a devastating 860-volt bioelectric discharge. When a heavily armored apex predator like a black caiman makes the fatal error of striking, the eel's shockwave violently hijacks the reptile's entire nervous system. In a fraction of a millisecond, the caiman's jaw muscles lock into absolute tetany, and this fearsome aquatic hunter is left completely paralyzed, doomed to drown in the very waters it once ruled. And if, by some miracle, you survive this catastrophic bioelectric shock, do not celebrate just yet. Because if that encounter spills even a microscopic drop of your blood into these murky waters, it will instantly summon an entirely new, ravenous legion of death. Slicing through the murk are these silent assassins, the red-bellied piranha. These are not merely fish, they are living aquatic razor blades, attacking in a synchronized, ruthless feeding frenzy of 30. These aquatic terrors possess jaw muscles so devastatingly engineered, they deliver a bite force over 30 times their own body mass. To put that into perspective, pound for pound, this bite force eclipses even prehistoric history's ultimate apex predator, the Tyrannosaurus rex. Armed with precise interlocking triangular teeth, they can, in a matter of minutes, systematically strip a massive living creature of every ounce of its flesh, reducing it to a hauntingly pristine, white skeletal carcass. And then there is the terror most deeply entrenched in Amazonian folklore, the candiru, infamously known as the vampire fish. You have likely heard the horrifying urban legend that this translucent parasite tracks the chemical scent of human urine to burrow directly into the human anatomy. But scientific consensus dismisses this as a terrifying myth. The biological reality, however, is far more sinister. It is an obligate hematophagous parasite, a highly specialized blood drinker that silently infiltrates the gill cavities of much larger host fish. Its anatomy is weaponized with retractable, backward-facing spines that anchor deep into the host's tissue like biological grappling hooks, making extraction virtually impossible. And there, entombed within its living host, it slowly engorges itself, continually draining the creature's lifeblood. But the ultimate silent assassin of this aquatic slaughterhouse is no fish. It is a 30-foot, 500-pound reptilian behemoth, the green anaconda. This leviathan is nature's perfect stealth submarine. Evolution has engineered its biology so that its eyes and nostrils sit uniquely atop its skull, rather than at the front of its snout. This precise adaptation allows it to completely submerge its colossal 30-foot frame beneath the murky waters, leaving only its eyes exposed as it lies in motionless, chilling ambush for weeks on end. Its prey remains entirely oblivious, completely unaware that it is quenching its thirst while standing directly atop death incarnate. And when it finally strikes, this titan does not rely on venom. It weaponizes pure, terrifying mechanical force to execute its kill. As the green anaconda loops its massive coils around its victim, it exerts an apocalyptic crushing pressure of 90 pounds per square inch. This constriction is so overwhelmingly immense that long before any bones can shatter, the victim's circulatory system completely collapses, forcing the heart into immediate catastrophic cardiac arrest. Triggering a catastrophic fatal heart attack, this leviathan does not execute you by suffocating your breath. It kills you by stopping your blood. But the true grotesque horror of this apex predator only begins after its prey takes its final breath. Once it swallows a colossal caiman or wild beast entirely whole, the predator's gastric acid is so staggeringly corrosive and lethal that it will completely dissolve and liquefy the victim's solid bones, dense hooves, and even its teeth. And if you assume its reign of terror is strictly reserved for other species, you are dead wrong. In the realm of the green anaconda, sexual dimorphism is extreme. The females are exponentially more gigantic and powerful than their male counterparts. When mating season arrives, to secure the massive caloric intake required for gestation, the female will often ruthlessly cannibalize and swallow alive her own male mate. Yet, this is no act of mindless gluttony. It is nature's exceptionally brutal, highly calculated evolutionary survival strategy. Throughout her punishing pregnancy, the mother must endure 7 grueling months of total starvation, all while incubating dozens of live, developing embryos inside her own body. To endure this agonizing, months-long fast, she requires an immediate, massive infusion of super protein, and so, the smaller male, in a morbid biological pact to ensure the survival of his own bloodline, makes the ultimate sacrifice, offering himself as pure sustenance within the terrifying depths of her stomach. Here, yet another convention of biology is shattered. Unlike the vast majority of reptilian species, the female green anaconda does not lay eggs. Instead, she delivers a brood of 20 to 40 fully formed, highly lethal live young directly into the water, and within mere seconds of taking their very first breath. These miniature assassins are already swimming through the murk, hardwired and fully primed to execute their first kill. Chapter 2: Terrestrial Nightmares. Emerging alive from the river's aquatic underworld by no means guarantees your safety. The very second you drag yourself onto dry land, you cross into a realm of the Amazon so dense and unforgiving that even sunlight itself struggles to penetrate the forest floor. Welcome to the dark forest floor, a suffocating, perpetually shadowed layer of the Amazonian biome, where lethal predators lie in silent ambush beneath every rotting log and decaying leaf. The undisputed sovereign of this shadowed realm is the jaguar. While lions and tigers rely on prolonged asphyxiation to subdue their prey, the jaguar's method of execution is entirely unique and infinitely more brutal. This biological killing machine targets the skull directly. With bone-crushing jaw pressure, it shatters the temporal bone in a single devastating strike, instantly penetrating the brain. In a fraction of a second, the prey suffers instantaneous neurological termination, dying before it can even process the attack. Yet, within this green hell, a predator does not require immense size to claim your life. You must calculate every single step you take upon this decaying forest floor. For perfectly camouflaged within these shadows lies the longest venomous snake in the Western Hemisphere, the fearsome Bushmaster. This silent assassin will hold a single motionless ambush position for weeks on end, waiting with chilling patience for the absolute perfect strike. When it finally strikes, its venom doesn't merely coagulate the blood. It acts as a horrific biochemical cocktail, literally liquefying human tissue from the inside out. And even if you manage to evade the silent terrors of the forest floor, death can still descend upon you from the canopy above. Enter the bullet ant. It earns its ominous moniker for a terrifying reason. The sheer agony of its sting is biologically indistinguishable from being struck point blank by a live gunshot. Reigning supreme at the absolute pinnacle of the Schmidt pain index, its venom induces a level of torment often described as walking barefoot across a bed of blazing volcanic coals, while simultaneously having a 3-inch rusted iron nail driven squarely into your heel. And this excruciating affliction does not merely fade after a few minutes. Instead, the neurotoxin aggressively hijacks your central nervous system, plunging the body into an agonizing, fiery hellscape for 24 relentless hours. Yet mankind has managed to weaponize nature's most unimaginable pain into a harrowing rite of passage. Deep within the Amazon, the Satere Mawe tribe decrees that a boy can only ascend to the status of a true warrior by thrusting his hands into ceremonial gloves tightly woven with hundreds of furious living bullet ants. He must endure this searing, venomous inferno for 10 agonizing minutes without uttering a single scream and without shedding a single tear. But the most chilling aspect of this ordeal, to solidify his legacy as a warrior, he must survive this excruciating trial not just once, but an unfathomable 20 times throughout his life. In the Amazon, apex predators aren't the only executioners. Drifting silently through the humid air is an invisible biological demon, one that directly hacks the host's central nervous system. That demon is the zombie fungus, cordyceps. It is the terrifying real-world biological inspiration behind The Last of Us. The moment this parasitic fungus breaches an ant's exoskeleton, it releases a potent biochemical payload that aggressively hijacks the host's entire central nervous system. Stripped of its own autonomy, the ant ceases to act on free will. It is reduced to a mindless biological puppet. The fungus forcefully pilots its host upwards into the canopy, navigating to a mathematically precise altitude where humidity and temperature create the absolute perfect microclimate for fungal reproduction. Upon reaching this exact coordinate, the parasite compels the ant to clamp its mandibles onto a leaf vein with such devastating, locking force that the insect physically cannot release its bite, a phenomenon known in parasitology as the death grip. Paralyzed, the host quietly expires. Then the true horror unfolds. A grotesque, fruiting fungal stalk violently erupts directly out of the ant's skull. It engineers this elevated vantage point for one terrifying purpose: to rain a toxic, invisible cloud of spores down upon the foraging trails below, systematically infecting and zombifying entire colonies in one catastrophic sweep. Chapter 3. Bizarre Adaptations. This unrelenting gauntlet of death has forced the Amazon's inhabitants to push the very boundaries of evolutionary survival. Choked by oxygen-depleted swamps, the colossal Pirarucu has radically adapted, evolving the ability to breach the surface and breathe atmospheric air directly into its primitive lungs. Meanwhile, microscopic nanopillars on the wings of the glasswing butterfly aggressively refract incoming light, rendering the insect virtually invisible to the naked eye of any predator. Yet amidst this chaotic theater of apex predators, one creature opted out of the arms race entirely, choosing not flight, but absolute, profound stillness as its ultimate defense. Meet the absolute anomaly of the Amazon, the three-toed sloth. This creature moves at such an excruciatingly glacial pace that its very fur becomes host to an entirely self-contained micro-jungle ecosystem. It possesses the most lethargic digestive tract on the planet. Processing the nutrients of just a single solitary leaf requires an agonizing 30 days, an entire month for one bite of food. It spends almost its entire lifespan high in the canopy, perfectly safe from apex predators. But precisely once a week, It takes a calculated, suicidal risk, an evolutionary quirk that utterly baffles biologists. Once a week, it slowly descends from its sanctuary, climbing all the way down to the highly lethal forest floor solely to defecate, which begs a staggering logical question. With the ground teeming with jaguars, why doesn't it just drop its waste safely from the canopy? The answer lies in biological symbiosis. If it did that, a highly specialized species of insect living exclusively in its fur, known as the sloth moth, would be entirely incapable of flying all the way down to the ground. Therefore, to ensure the absolute survival of these tenant moths, the sloth risks its own life. It meticulously excavates a trench at the tree's base, providing the exact nutrient-rich environment for the moths to lay their eggs. Astonishingly, during this single biological purge, the sloth sheds up to a staggering 30% of its total body weight. When the next generation of moths eventually migrates back up into the fur, they cultivate a specialized green algae. This algae provides the sloth with an optical illusion, a miraculous biological camouflage that renders it virtually invisible against the Amazonian canopy. And during periods of extreme scarcity, the sloth can literally absorb essential nutrients directly from this algae through its own skin. Yet, this masterclass in evolutionary symbiosis demands an incredibly brutal toll. In those terrifying few minutes exposed on the forest floor, over 50% of all sloths are violently ambushed and slaughtered by jaguars. It is, without question, the most terrifying and lethal bathroom break on Earth, a phenomenon completely exclusive to the Green Hell. Now, while historical texts routinely credit mankind as the sole inventors of agriculture, the leafcutter ants of the Amazon have been operating a highly advanced subterranean fungal farming empire for the last 50 million years. These ants do not actually consume the foliage. Instead, they utilize it as organic fertilizer to cultivate vast subterranean fungal crops, effectively engineering a highly advanced underground agricultural empire. Observing this sophisticated biological agriculture alongside such ruthless apex predators, it is easy to assume that the Amazon has always been a pristine, untouched wilderness, an empty empire ruled exclusively by raw nature and savage beasts. But this is precisely where the annals of history have fed us a monumental lie. What if we told you that the creatures engineering empires beneath the soil were not the only architects here? What if we told you that this impenetrable, terrifying green abyss was once completely subjugated and heavily trodden by human civilization? And not merely a scattered few hundred, but a thriving populace of millions. Entombed beneath these 390 billion trees lies a staggering truth, one that is poised to completely rewrite the entire narrative of human history. Chapter 4: The Buried Secrets. For centuries, the accepted narrative dictated that the Amazon was a primeval, impenetrable green hell, an unforgiving wilderness where human civilization could never possibly take root. But in January 2024, that narrative was completely shattered. When archaeologist Stephen Rostaine deployed advanced airborne LiDAR technology to digitally peel back the suffocating canopy, the resulting data sent absolute shockwaves through the global scientific community. In the western fringes, where the sprawling jungle collides with the Andean foothills of Ecuador, the LiDAR scans exposed the colossal footprints of massive, interconnected urban centers in the Upano Valley, dating all the way back to 500 BCE. This was no fragmented collection of nomadic tribes. These inhabitants were master engineers of antiquity. Their urban centers featured flawlessly straight, 10-meter-wide thoroughfares stretching for an astonishing 20 kilometers. This was no modest settlement of 1,000 or two. These were thriving metropolises housing millions of people. A profound question naturally arises. If these lands supported millions, Why don't we see the monolithic stone palaces or towering pyramids characteristic of the Egyptian or Mayan civilizations? The answer lies within the uncompromising geography of this formidable rainforest. Deep within this sector of the Amazon, the raw stone required for such monumental construction simply did not exist. Consequently, these ancient master engineers bypassed stone entirely, utilizing highly engineered earth and timber to construct their colossal pyramids, sprawling residential complexes, and monumental platforms. Today, as scientists excavate this jungle floor, they don't unearth stone ruins. Instead, they discover enigmatic geometric formations sprawling for miles, alongside massive earthen platforms and millions of exquisitely crafted pottery fragments. These artifacts serve as resounding, undeniable testaments that a magnificent, highly advanced civilization once thrived here. But this presents the scientific community with another monumental paradox. Amazonian soil is notoriously acidic and nutrient-poor, a literal curse for large-scale agriculture. The earth here is inherently barren. How, then, did this hostile environment successfully sustain and feed a population of millions? The answer lay in a miraculous feat of agricultural alchemy that transformed this green hell into an agrarian paradise. We call it Terra Preta, the Amazonian Dark Earth. Roughly 2.5 millennia ago, these prehistoric scientists engineered a highly specific biocharcoal matrix, meticulously blending smoldering wood, fragmented animal bones, and organic refuse to forge a miraculous, self-sustaining soil composite. An agronomic masterstroke so advanced, it remains incredibly fertile thousands of years later. They did not conquer the jungle, they engineered a flawless symbiosis with it. So, how did this highly advanced empire of millions simply vanish into the abyss? The chilling truth is, they were not decimated by the savage predators of this unforgiving wilderness. Their absolute annihilation came in the 16th century at the hands of an invisible imported demon from across the Atlantic, the smallpox virus. This was no ordinary pathogen. It was an apocalyptic biological holocaust. Sweeping through the canopy, it ruthlessly exterminated 80% of the indigenous population within a matter of decades. In the eerie silence following the Great Dying, torrential Amazonian monsoons and relentless swarms of termites rapidly liquefied their timber architecture, and the jungle silently, methodically reclaimed its territory, swallowing their desolate metropolises and burying their legacy forever. Yet, even in the wake of this apocalyptic annihilation, a few phantoms of the Amazon managed to survive. Even today, concealed within the deepest, most impenetrable shadows of the Javari Valley, straddling the border of Brazil and Peru, exist uncontacted tribes remaining entirely isolated from the modern world. Should a solitary aircraft or drone breach their airspace, they perceive it as an alien entity or a flying demon, responding instantly with a relentless, hostile volley of arrows. To the outside world, their existence might appear primitive, characterized primarily by their complete absence of clothing. However, this is not a symptom of regression. It is a highly calculated, masterful display of evolutionary survival science. In the suffocating humidity and swamp-like heat of the Amazon, wearing garments equates to a biological death sentence, providing the perfect breeding ground for lethal fungal infections. Therefore, they substitute textiles with a thick paste derived from red urucum seeds, forging a biological armor that completely insulates their skin from both parasitic mosquitoes and searing ultraviolet radiation. Our so-called civilized world often operates under the assumption that a lack of clothing, that sheer nudity, inherently breeds promiscuity, deviance, and crime. But the sociological reality of these uncontacted tribes delivers a resounding, humiliating blow to the arrogance of modern society. Despite existing entirely without garments, their internal societal codes governing marital fidelity and male-female relations are bound by an incredibly strict, unyielding moral architecture, far more rigid than we could ever fathom. In stark, horrifying contrast to our so-called safe and modern world, within these deeply traditional, unclad societies, the incidence of sexual assault is virtually zero. If humanity has ever been truly disgraced within these 6.7 million square kilometers, the perpetrators were not these indigenous stewards, but rather the savage, clothed invaders of the modern era. When 19th and 20th century prospectors, blinded by a ravenous, insatiable greed for gold and rubber, penetrated this pristine canopy, they unleashed a wave of unbridled depravity. They weaponized the tribe's natural state of undress, mocking it as primitive backwardness to justify their own abhorrent, predatory lust. These invaders systematically stripped the indigenous populations of their ancestral lands, violently forced them into brutal slavery, and subjected their women to soul-crushing, unspeakable atrocities. But make no mistake, these tribes were never merely passive victims who quietly surrendered to this tyrannical oppression. When colonial firearms and boundless greed breached their sanctuary, they retaliated with a terrifying, ferocious guerrilla resistance that brought their civilized oppressors to their absolute knees. When confronted with the devastating firepower of modern ballistics against their traditional bows, these indigenous tribes weaponized the very architecture of the Amazon, launching a terrifying, hyper-lethal campaign of guerrilla warfare. Under the absolute cover of pitch-black darkness, they executed perfectly synchronized ambushes on the prospectors' camps, liberating their captive kin and systematically scavenging advanced iron weaponry before evaporating back into the impenetrable jungle shadows, dissolving as if they were mere phantoms. Yet far more catastrophic than any bullet were the invisible alien pathogens imported by the modern invaders, diseases like influenza and smallpox, against which their isolated immune systems had zero biological defense. Realizing that achieving victory against these civilized monsters was a mathematical impossibility, the tribes, in a desperate bid to preserve their bloodlines and protect their women, executed one of the most agonizing, monumental decisions in human history. Anthropological science defines this protocol as voluntary isolation. They mandated a complete, permanent severance from the outside world. Abandoning their ancestral lands, they plunged even deeper into the absolute extremes of the Amazon, migrating into the most hostile, inaccessible sectors like the Javari Valley, where the canopy is so thick that sunlight itself barely touches the earth. Today, the modern world naively labels them as uncontacted tribes, operating under the arrogant assumption that they are entirely ignorant of global civilization. The reality is, they are not primitive relics. They are, in fact, highly strategic refugees who successfully escaped a horrific, systemic genocide. Survivors whose ancestors deliberately chose this brutal green hell as their ultimate sanctuary, exclusively to shield all future generations from the atrocities of modern humanity. This historical trauma is precisely why, today, when a drone or a foreign entity trespasses into their airspace, they do not cower or hide. They immediately draw their arrows with lethal intent, because their collective memory serves as a daily grim reminder that the only entity more terrifying and ruthless than the Amazon's jaguars and anacondas is the modern human from the outside world. These tribes are not governed by conventional kings or chieftains. Their ultimate authority is a shaman, a master of mysticism and a profound healer. A shaman is far more than a mere mortal. He is the ethereal conduit, the living bridge connecting his people directly to the ancient spirits of the forest. Certain rituals embedded within their culture are so profoundly esoteric and chilling, they would shake a modern observer to their very core. For instance, deep within the Amazon, tribes like the Yanomami observe a mortuary practice that defies global norms. When a loved one perishes, they absolutely refuse to bury the body. Instead, the deceased is cremated, their skeletal remains meticulously pulverized into ash, blended into a traditional plantain soup, and ceremonially consumed by the entire grieving family. This is a profound act of endocannibalism, driven by the absolute belief that ingesting the remains ensures the deceased's vital energy and spirit will live on eternally within the tribe. Far from being primitive, these indigenous people are the apex guardians of this green hell. The shamans command an intricate, generational mastery of botanical science that often eclipses modern pharmacology. By weaponizing the rainforest's flora, they engineered an unparalleled instrument of death, a feat of pure biochemical hacking known as curare venom. The moment a curare-laced dart pierces the flesh of its target, the neurotoxin instantly bypasses all physiological defenses, violently hijacking the victim's entire neurological framework. The victim's brain remains entirely lucid and acutely aware, yet their physical body is plunged into a state of absolute, unbreakable paralysis. Trapped within their own paralyzed shell, the prey is forced to watch their own execution with wide-open eyes, slowly and agonizingly succumbing to asphyxiation. But consider the profound paradox of this unforgiving jungle. This exact, terrifying indigenous neurotoxin would eventually revolutionize the entire trajectory of modern medical science. Derived directly from this lethal botanical blueprint, modern pharmacology synthesized surgical muscle relaxants, the very compounds used in operating rooms today to save your life. Between the buried metropolises, the apex predators, and the uncontacted tribes, it felt as though the Amazon had finally surrendered all its secrets. But we were profoundly wrong. The Amazon's most colossal mystery isn't entombed beneath the soil. It is violently churning deep within the Earth's mantle and soaring high into the stratosphere. Would you believe that deep within this dense rainforest flows a river that, without a single volcano anywhere in sight, is literally boiling animals alive? And what if you were told that the very heartbeat of this massive green hell is intrinsically tied to the driest, most barren desert on the entire planet? Brace yourself, because we are about to plunge into scientific anomalies so extreme, they will completely shatter your understanding of the natural world. Chapter 5: The Cosmic Miracles. The Amazon is far more than a mere graveyard for lost empires and ruthless predators. It operates as the ultimate planetary laboratory, where nature executes its most colossal, terrifying miracles. Deep within the dense, forbidding jungles of central Peru flows a body of water that violently defies every known law of conventional science. This is Shanai Timpishka, a terrifying, boiling river plunging 15 feet deep and stretching over 6.4 kilometers long. When geoscientist Andres Russo first introduced this anomaly to the global stage, the scientific community was absolutely stunned. Its waters violently churn at an apocalyptic 90 degrees Celsius. The true paradox: the nearest active volcano is a staggering 700 kilometers away. So what exactly is fueling this massive, churning cauldron? This is not sorcery, but a terrifying subterranean geological mechanism. Torrential rainwater percolates through the porous fissures of the jungle floor, descending kilometers deep into the Earth's crust. With every kilometer it plunges into the abyss, the ambient subterranean temperature surges by a staggering 25 degrees Celsius. This apocalyptic geothermal heat violently superheats the water. Under immense pressure, the boiling fluid radically reverses course, violently fracturing the bedrock as it rockets upward, erupting back to the surface like a catastrophic pressure cooker. Any living creature unfortunate enough to fall in is instantly boiled alive in a fraction of a second. But the ultimate miracle of this biosphere does not unfold on the ground. It flows invisibly through the heavens. The Amazon is not merely a collection of flora. It operates as a single living organism, a colossal, interconnected entity that literally breathes. In 1984, climatologist Aeneas Salati made a groundbreaking discovery that forever shattered humanity's understanding of this biome. He revealed that these 390 billion trees are not just passively anchored to the earth. Every single day, this botanical empire actively pumps a staggering 20 billion tons of moisture from the soil, exhaling it directly into the atmosphere as pure vapor. Just imagine, 20 billion tons of water. This is a colossal atmospheric anomaly, a torrential, invisible river flowing relentlessly across the sky. This invisible airborne current yields such staggering meteorological power that it single-handedly dictates the climate and precipitation cycles from the deep south of South America, all the way to the American Midwest. And now, the ultimate enigma of this entire biosphere, a staggering truth guaranteed to completely shatter your perception of the natural world. According to geological science, the soil of the Amazon is so severely nutrient-depleted and infertile that a forest of this magnitude should biologically be impossible to sustain. How then does this sprawling 6.7 million square kilometer emerald empire continue to survive and flourish? Brace yourselves, because the vital heartbeat of the largest, most vibrant rainforest on Earth is inextricably linked to the driest, most desolate desert on the planet. The mechanics are as awe-inspiring as they are brutal. Every single year, violent atmospheric currents rip 27.7 million tons of mineral-rich dust directly from the Sahara, propelling it on an epic transoceanic journey thousands of kilometers across the vast expanse of the Atlantic, and descends directly upon the Amazonian canopy, acting as a seemingly magical airborne fertilizer. Hidden within this Saharan dust payload is an astronomical 22,000 tons of pure phosphorus, the absolute non-negotiable biological catalyst essential for the survival of the rainforest. And here lies the staggeringly precise, magical mathematics of nature. The 22,000 tons of phosphorus imported from the Sahara exactly mirrors the exact tonnage of phosphorus violently washed away from the Amazon's topsoil by torrential rains every single year. In essence, the desiccated dust of a lifeless desert is physically keeping the world's largest, most vibrant rainforest breathing. The very moment the Sahara ceases to export this dust, the Amazon will wither, desiccate, and collapse forever. For hundreds of millions of years, nature has ruthlessly maintained this delicate, miraculous equilibrium between a barren desert and a thriving jungle. No localized natural disaster, no hurricane, no drought could ever fracture the Amazon's resolve. But today, a new, unprecedented demon has infiltrated this green hell, mechanically hollowing it out from the inside. We are rapidly hurtling toward a mathematical threshold, a terminal boundary beyond which there is absolutely no return. Science defines this catastrophic threshold as the tipping point, and if this threshold is crossed, it will not merely be the end of the Amazon, but the permanent ignition of a burning hellscape across the entire globe. Chapter 6: The Tipping Point. This is the juncture in our narrative where the mysteries dissolve and the miracles come to a sudden, devastating end. What remains in their wake is nothing but a stark, cold, and profoundly shameful reality. Throughout this expedition, we have sought out aquatic leviathans in the dark waters and recoiled from ferocious apex predators on land. But the chilling truth is this: within this invincible wilderness, there is no monster more ruthless, no predator more devastating than modern mankind. A primordial biosphere that withstood cataclysmic ice ages for tens of millions of years, is now collapsing to its knees under the crushing weight of human greed. Consider the staggering magnitude of our selfishness. A pristine paradise that nature meticulously cultivated over 50 million years. We are now mercilessly incinerating, reducing it to ash simply to clear land for cheap cattle ranching and mass-produced soybean fields. We are actively tearing out the very lungs of our planet, and the reality of this devastation is far more horrifying than any fiction. In the year 2024 alone, we reduced a staggering 1.7 million hectares of irreplaceable primary forest to absolute ash, erasing it forever. And now, we are hurtling dangerously close to that crimson threshold, a terminal boundary beyond which there is absolutely no return. Nature will never forgive us for this catastrophic transgression. Eminent climatologists Carlos Nobre and Thomas Lovejoy have issued humanity a severe, mathematically uncompromising ultimatum. In the scientific lexicon, it is known as the tipping point, the exact terminal threshold where total ecological collapse becomes irreversible, and their warning is chillingly unequivocal. If total deforestation breaches the critical 20 to 25% threshold, the Amazon's self-sustaining hydrological life cycle will permanently and catastrophically fracture. And do you comprehend exactly where we stand today? We have already obliterated 17 to 18% of this primordial biome. We are violently knocking on the door of our own extinction, the exact microsecond that needle eclipses the 20% mark. The Amazon will abruptly cease generating its life-giving flying rivers. Starved of atmospheric moisture, colossal, centuries-old titans will literally suffocate from dehydration, withering into brittle husks before our very eyes. Without a single human spark or chainsaw, the entire desiccated rainforest will spontaneously combust, engulfing itself in an apocalyptic, unstoppable inferno. And that remaining 70% of dense, lush paradise will irreversibly morph into a desiccated, lifeless savanna forever. The exact moment the Amazon breaches this tipping point, the Earth's entire global meteorological system will violently and completely collapse. The summers will become so apocalyptic that humans will literally scorch on city streets, and global farmlands will be reduced to barren, cracked wastelands. Because the Amazon is not merely an arbitrary collection of trees, it is the Earth's single living organism, a living, beating body. Its rivers are its blood. Its trees are its lungs. And its creatures are its heartbeat. When we incinerate the Amazon, we aren't merely burning a forest. The question is no longer, how will the Amazon survive without us? The true question is, how will we survive without the Amazon? Because remember, the moment this jungle takes its final breath, our own will not be far behind.